All right, we're at the halfway mark. So what I want to do is start taking folks' questions, but I want to begin with Clyde Prestowitz, who I believe is going to get beamed in, and then I will go through the chat and pick up some of your other questions. Clyde, you're muted, Clyde.
There we go. Okay,
Sure.
hear me now?
Yep.
Bill, let me congratulate you on a great book.
Thank you.
So my question is regarding.
You're not on camera. Can you allow your video to be on? We'll see your shining face, but otherwise you can be anonymous if you wish.
Well, I think I'm on video. Aren't I there?
Nope.
Well, I don't know.
Your name is, though.
Maybe that would do it. How about that?
Hey.
What a handsome guy. Huh? Anyhow, here's the question. You talked about U.S. companies having helped the communist regime build what they've got, which is certainly true. I want to maybe take it a step further. If I look at a company like Apple, and we call it an American company, and legally it's, I guess, probably a Delaware company, but legally it is an American company. But I would argue, I wonder if you agree with me, that actually Tim Cook is more afraid of Beijing than he is of Washington. In Washington, he's powerful. He's got armies of lawyers and lobbyists. In Beijing, he kowtows just like everybody else. And I use Tim Cook, but the same is true for many, many other of the major US CEOs. I wonder if there's a way for the US to offset this tilt, this kind of inevitable tilt to China, because the Chinese government has more handle on our CEOs than our own government does.
Thank you, Clyde. Clyde and I had an article that appeared in the National Review this morning, so Chad will put that in the chat space, I think, at some point. Well, you know, in many ways, Apple is a Chinese company. Their entire production chain for iPhones and two other products, iMac and another product, are managed by a Taiwanese company, Honhai or Foxconn, in China. Their entire supply chain is located in China. The entire manufacturing platform is there. The Chinese built the infrastructure, the roads, the plants, and so the Chinese, in effect, control what Apple does. Apple has been forced to turn over their data centers in China to Chinese government. So Apple does not manage their own data centers there. Apple has been forced to take down apps from their app store in Hong Kong that were benefiting the demonstrators in Hong Kong. They were able to find out where the police were using these apps. Apple has not been able to take even the first step to diversify their production platforms outside of China. The big, much ballyhooed plant in Wisconsin just simply never happened. That was an early stage announcement that Donald Trump and Paul Ryan made with Foxconn. So Apple is trapped in many ways in China. Their iPhones were used to, it is alleged in print, were used to spy on Uyghurs who owned iPhones. So Apple is deeply enmeshed in the Chinese government and in the Chinese police state, in the Chinese avenues of influence. So if I were in the US government, I would be saying, let's have a conversation, Tim, about how we can ease you back from being, even though you're headquartered in California, you're an American, it's an American company, in a de facto sense, you have gone over to being a Chinese company. How can we help you? How can we help you move away from that? Can we help you develop manufacturing in the United States? Can we, so I would start by saying, how can we help you? And if he resists over a period of time, then I would start throwing fines and start throwing the big stick, as you and I wrote. The big stick, the federal government has the big stick. It can say, the companies, you're violating American national security, and we demand that you start cooperating with us to ease this pattern. So it's a big question. Apple is probably the company that is the single most intertwined in China, I would say. Thanks, Clyde.
Recommend everybody Bill and Clyde's article. All right, we've got a bunch of questions for y'all. You can put them in the chat or the Q&A function. But Aldous Frank asks, which bylines do you look for these days for reporting about China? Good journalist question.
Well, I look for the bylines of winners of the OPC Foundation scholarships. So I'm delighted to see that Wei Ling for the New York Times has become central to the coverage of China. And then Eva Dou, another one of our winners for is now the Washington Post bureau chief. Dake Kong is now one of our winners, now in the AP bureau and doing crackerjack stuff. It was a Pulitzer finalist. Imagine that at age 28, 29, it was a finalist for the Pulitzers. Yi Ling Lu I'm just seeing her today writing out of China. So we've created a group of people who are deeply involved there. I like others for the New York Times. We had a panel discussion recently, and so there's some deep knowledge in the New York Times, even though they're covering it now from Taiwan and Australia. Their people got kicked out, right? But they're able to get in there. Chris Buckley I think, one of the brightest and most courageous journalists. He's now writing out of Australia. So I read everything that comes out of China. The news wires are coming out now. There's a Sinocism. Bill Bishop does that. My friend Tiff Roberts, who was in Business Week in Beijing for 23 years, now does his own newsletter. So there's a flow of high quality information still coming out of China, even though the Chinese kicked out 15 or 17 Western correspondents and are applying major pressure against Western correspondents in terms of following them whenever they leave Beijing, intercepting their communications and constantly harassing them through the visas. And so the American journalists on the ground there are doing heroic jobs of trying to stand tall and deliver.
Those are all great bylines, and Sinocism and Chris Buckley in particular, I concur with, but you're the expert. One question we have is, when did it become obvious to you that China was not interested in becoming like us? Was it specific or gradual? And I'll add an addendum to that. What do you think the downfall of TPP was in terms of weakening an alliance against China with regard to trade?
Let me take the last thing first. That was a disastrous decision. We had the perfect tool there to link 12 nations, Japan, Australia, Southeast Asia, in a trade association that would have forced China to play by the rules that group established. To walk away from that was an absolute disaster. So to answer the first part of the question, the way things happen in China is all very gradually. This is one of the things that correspondents who have arrived in China from the Middle East or Africa, they're used to covering wars and insurrections and bang, bang, things really happen. Boom, 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 things happen. Things in China happen very gradually, very incrementally. So it was only when Xi Jinping took over, he launched his anti-corruption campaign, which was really a power grab. Had little to do with corruption. It was really about solidifying his power base. So it was really the first time, in my mind, the alarm bell started going off was when we had the OPC China Hands reunion in 2014, I believe it was. We had Evan Osnos there, Seymour Topping, a lot of top people there. And so we organized a day to talk about what's really happening in terms of their embrace of political liberalization. Well, they're moving the other direction, Evan Osnos told us. What's really happening in their economic modernization and their embrace of private sector? Well, they're moving backwards. So that was the first piece of it. So the second piece for me was writing the book, The New Art of War, which came out 2 or 3 years ago, where I began looking into the slowly incremental nature of how the Chinese were the new art of war is an important concept. We as Americans have never seen anything like this. The Soviet Union was a clear adversary. We had very little economic engagement with them. We were able to globalize, internationalize, and innovate technologically, and ultimately, we were able to force them to go belly up, to go bankrupt. We surrounded them. The Japanese were a much smaller nation. They never really were able to mount the intense offensive that it appeared at one point they were in the late 1980s. But the Chinese have developed this compete and cooperate model where at the same time we have effectively merged our economies. I mean, they're now the world's second largest economy. Walmart, Home Depot, and wherever you go into an American store, you're buying things made in America. We have linked ourselves so firmly, and that at the same time, then there's this confrontational dimension to it of technology, of influence. So we've never encountered a power like this, particularly in view of the fact that they have 1.4 billion people, roughly a 4-to-1 population advantage over us. So we have never encountered this before in American history. Never before have we. So we are at an intellectual kind of crossroads. Can we put our brains together and can we figure out the nature? Can we figure out the nature of this relationship? Can we figure out what's happening? And can we organize ourselves to respond? It is a first-class intellectual challenge that we all face. Can we cooperate as Americans across public sector lines, private sector lines? Can we cooperate? Can we pool our expertise, or can't we? Because the Chinese have declared a military civil fusion. They are a monolith. They're now 1.4 billion people following Xi Jinping thought. We need to, without abandoning our values, without abandoning the things we care about, we need to figure out how to become more cohesive, engaging in this very subtle and very sophisticated kinds of conflict.